The 1st century Anno Domini, a brilliant yet enigmatic era. As the Roman Empire reigned supreme, new ideas shook the foundations of belief, and mysterious events carved themselves into the timeline of history. From the shadowy forests of Germania to the dusty roads of Judea, from the towering marvels of Rome to the quiet manipulation of time itself, this century was a stage for stories that continue to ignite our curiosity. How did an elite Roman army vanish into the Teutoburg Forest? Does a true likeness of Jesus Christ exist, who was really behind the great fire that consumed Rome? And why did the Julian calendar, once a symbol of precision, require a secret correction? Join us as we unravel the 10 greatest mysteries of the 1st century riddles from the past that still challenge our understanding today. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more historical mysteries brought to light. How the Colosseum was built. Ancient engineering still stuns today. In the heart of Rome, a towering monument rises from the earth, its weathered stones whispering tales of gladiators, emperors, and a civilization unmatched in ambition. The Colosseum began in 70 Anno Domini and completed in 80 Anno Domini Street, and as the greatest amphitheater of the ancient world, a marvel that still leaves modern architects and engineers in awe. How did the Romans in the 1st century, with no machines or modern tools, construct this colossal structure capable of seating 50,000 people? What ingenious techniques allowed them to raise its massive arches, move tons of stone, and create a building that has endured for nearly 2 millennia? This is the story of the Colosseum's creation, a mystery of engineering genius that continues to captivate the world. Let us journey back to the 1st century, when Rome was the pulsing heart of an empire stretching across 3 continents. Under the Flavian emperors, Vespasian, Titus, and Domitian, Rome sought to restore its glory after the chaos of Nero's reign and the civil war of 69 Anno Domini. Vespasian, a pragmatic general turned emperor, commissioned the Colosseum in 70 Anno Domini to win the people's favor and celebrate Rome's resilience. Built on the site of Nero's opulent Golden House, the amphitheater was a bold statement of power, designed to host gladiatorial games, animal hunts, and public spectacles. Yet its construction was a feat so extraordinary that even today, we struggle to fully understand the methods behind it. The Colosseum, known then as the Flavian Amphitheater, was a marvel of scale. It measured 620 feet long, 510 feet wide, and 160 feet tall, with 4 stories of arches and columns. Its elliptical design could hold up to 50,000 spectators, seated according to social rank from senators to slaves. The arena floor, covering 83 by 48 meters, concealed a labyrinth of underground chambers, tunnels, and trapdoors for dramatic effects. Constructing such a structure in just 10 years, in a crowded city with only human and animal power, was a logistical and engineering challenge that defies modern imagination. How did the Romans achieve this? The foundation of the Colosseum was the first hurdle. Built on a former lakebed from Nero's palace, the site was marshy and unstable. Roman engineers drained the area, likely using channels and aqueducts to redirect water, a technique honed in the 1st century for Rome's sewer systems. They then laid a massive concrete foundation up to 40 feet deep in places using a Roman invention, concrete made from volcanic ash lime and aggregate. This concrete, stronger and more flexible than many modern mixes, allowed the Colosseum to withstand earthquakes and time. The precise recipe, tailored to the local materials of central Italy, remains a subject of study, as modern scientists marvel at its durability. The Colosseum's walls and arches, built from travertine tuff and brick, posed another challenge. Travertine, a hard limestone quarried from Tivoli 20 miles away, was cut into blocks weighing up to several tons. How were these blocks transported and lifted? The Romans used a network of roads and oxen to haul stones to Rome, but the lifting process is less clear. Evidence suggests they employed cranes, powered by human tread wheels, where workers walked inside large wooden wheels to hoist stones via ropes and pulleys. These cranes, described by the 1st century architect Vitruvius, could lift heavy loads with precision. Iron clamps and dowels found in the Colosseum's ruins secured the stones, a technique that ensured stability without mortar in some areas. The Colosseum's arches, a hallmark of Roman architecture, were both functional and beautiful, using the principle of the keystone where a central stone locks an arch in place. The Romans created a structure that distributed weight evenly, allowing for vast open spaces. The Colosseum has 80 arches on its ground level alone, each meticulously aligned. This precision required advanced surveying tools, like the groma, a 1st-century device for measuring angles and ensuring straight lines. The Romans' mathematical skill, rooted in Greek geometry, allowed them to calculate loads and stresses, a knowledge that astonishes modern engineers who study the structure's resilience. The underground hypogeum, a network of tunnels and chambers beneath the arena, is perhaps the Colosseum's most mysterious feature. Added during Domitian's reign in the 80s Anno Domini, it housed animals, gladiators, and machinery for spectacular shows. Trapdoors and elevators, operated by capstans and counterweights, raised beasts and fighters into the arena, stunning crowds. How did the Romans design and build this complex system? Without modern engineering tools, archaeological evidence suggests they used wooden frameworks and bronze fittings, with teams of workers coordinating precise movements. The hypogeum's construction required digging through the concrete foundation, a task that demanded exact planning to avoid weakening the structure above. Labor was another enigma. The Colosseum required thousands of workers, slaves, prisoners of war, and skilled craftsmen. Jewish captives from the First Jewish Revolt, crushed in 70 Anno Domini, likely provided much of the labor, as Vespasian funded the project with spoils from Jerusalem. These workers, supervised by Roman engineers, worked under grueling conditions, hauling stone, mixing concrete, and erecting scaffolds. The speed of construction, completed in a decade, suggests a highly organized workforce with supply chains stretching across the empire. Yet no detailed records of their methods survive, leaving us to piece together clues from the stones themselves. The Colosseum's purpose adds to its mystery. Was it merely a venue for entertainment? Or did it serve a deeper role? In the 1st century, public spectacles were political tools uniting Rome's diverse population under imperial authority. Vespasian's decision to build on Nero's land was a symbolic rejection of tyranny, offering the people a gift paid for by conquest. The Colosseum's grandeur, with its ornate columns and statues, reflected Rome's power, but its engineering, innovative and precise, hinted at a civilization pushing the boundaries of what was possible. Some scholars suggest the structure was a propaganda masterpiece, designed to awe both Romans and visitors. The techniques behind the Colosseum's construction remain a puzzle because few 1st-century sources explain them. Vitruvius's De Architectura, written decades earlier, describes Roman building methods, but the Colosseum's scale was unprecedented. Later writers like Suetonius mention its grandeur, but not its construction. Archaeological studies reveal advanced techniques like concrete vaults and modular stonework, but the exact processes from quarry to completion are reconstructed through educated guesses. Modern engineers marvel at the Romans' ability to align massive arches and coordinate thousands of workers without computers or mechanized tools. As we stand before the Colosseum today, its weathered stones tell a story of ingenuity and ambition. The Romans of the 1st century, with only their minds' hands and simple tools, built a monument that has outlasted empires. The mystery of its construction lies not just in the techniques, but in the vision that drove it, a vision of a Rome eternal, carved in stone. How did they achieve such precision, such scale, such durability? The answers lie buried in the past, in the minds of engineers and laborers, whose secrets the Colosseum still guards, a testament to a civilization that built the impossible. The vanishing of Varus's legion, Rome's army lost in the Teutoburg Forest. Imagine standing in the heart of a dark ancient forest, where sunlight barely filters through the thick canopy of leaves. The air is damp and heavy, thick with the scent of earth and decaying foliage. Somewhere in the distance, a raven's caw echoes, as if foretelling a grim fate. This is the Teutoburg Forest in the year 9 Anno Domini, a wild and untamed land in Germania. Here, the mighty Roman Empire, the greatest power the world has ever known, is about to face its most catastrophic defeat. This is a story of trust, betrayed, of arrogance, leading to ruin, and of one man who changed the course of European history forever. Picture a vast army, 3 Roman legions, 1718 and 11 over 15,000 soldiers, strong, forged through centuries of conquest. They are the embodiment of Rome's unstoppable might, clad in gleaming armor-wielding shields and swords that have made empires tremble. Leading them is Publius Quinctilius Varus, a seasoned general whose confidence borders on hubris. Varus believes Germania, this land of so-called barbarians, is already under Rome's control. He imposes heavy taxes, burns villages, and demands the German tribes abandon their ancient customs. But he is blind to the storm brewing in the shadows of these forests. The man orchestrating that storm is Arminius, a young chieftain of the Cherusci tribe. Arminius is no ordinary German warrior. Raised in Rome, he was trained in Roman warfare, dressed in the robes of a noble, and even granted Roman citizenship. To Varus, Arminius is a trusted ally, a loyal advisor, but beneath this facade burns a heart filled with defiance. Arminius has seen Rome's cruelty firsthand, villages, raised families chained, and the sacred traditions of his people trampled. He does not dream of serving Rome. He dreams of freedom. In the quiet of moonless nights beneath the sacred oaks of Germania, Arminius achieves the impossible. He unites the German tribes, Cherusci, Marsi, Chatti, Bructeri tribes that have fought each other for generations. Around flickering fires, he speaks not of gold or power, but of something far greater, the freedom to live as their ancestors did, to worship their gods, to protect their homeland. His words ignite a spark, and the tribes listen. The fateful day arrives on a gloomy morning. Arminius brings Varus false news of a minor uprising in a distant corner of Germania. Without hesitation, Varus orders his legions to march from their camp deep into the Teutoburg Forest to crush the rebels. But the path they take is no grand Roman road. It is a narrow, muddy trail, hemmed in by dense woods and treacherous bogs. The Roman column stretches for miles, burdened with wagoned civilians and soldiers' families. Varus is unaware that thousands of eyes are watching from the shadows. Then the trap springs shut. From the hills, from the trees, thousands of German warriors burst forth like a forest storm. Spears, javelins, and arrows rain down upon the Romans. The legions trained to fight in tight formations on open fields are thrown into chaos. The narrow path prevents them from forming ranks. Torrential rain turns the ground to mud, slowing their steps and soaking the strings of their archers' bows. The war cries of the Germans echo through the forest, as if the spirits of the woods themselves are punishing the invaders. The battle rages for 3 days, a relentless nightmare of blood and despair. On the first day, the Romans try to fight back, but the Germans' lightning-fast raids leave them bleeding and broken. On the second day, Varus leads his men to an open clearing, hoping to regroup. But this is Calcresa narrow pass, where Arminius has built a wall of earth and timber to block their escape. The Romans are cornered with no way out. Blood flows in rivers, mingling with the rain, turning the forest into a graveyard. By the third day, Varus knows all is lost. With the pride of a Roman, he and his senior officers draw their swords and take their own lives to avoid capture. Thousands of Roman soldiers are slaughtered. A few are taken prisoner, their fates shrouded in the grim rituals of the German tribes. The 3 mighty legions, the 17, 18, the 11, vanish entirely from history. Their numbers are never used again in the Roman army, as if cursed forever. When news of the disaster reaches Rome, Emperor Augustus, ruler of the known world, collapses in grief. It is said he pounds his chest, tears his robes, and cries out in agony, "Quintilius, Varus, give me back my legions." But no answer comes. The Teutoburg Forest has swallowed Rome's dreams of conquering Germania. The Rhine River becomes the eternal frontier, dividing the Roman world from the free tribes of the East. Arminius, the hero of the Germans, becomes a symbol of resistance, but his triumph is short-lived. Years later, he is betrayed and assassinated by his own people, who fear he might become a Roman-style king, ruling them with an iron fist. Yet his legacy endures. The Battle of the Teutoburg Forest is more than a Roman defeat. It is a defining moment for Europe, a continent where peoples rose up against the mightiest empire in history and proved that no empire is invincible. Centuries later, archaeologists uncover traces of the battle at Calchries, rusted Roman armor, broken spears, and mass graves filled with bones. Each artifact whispers of the carnage that unfolded in that forest. The Battle of the Teutoburg Forest is not just history. It is a lesson in loyalty and betrayal, in arrogance, and the price of underestimating an enemy. Today, as you walk through the forests of Germany, pause and listen. You might hear the wind carrying the whispers of ancient warriors, of Arminius, of Varus, and of the souls who fell in that dark forest. The Battle of the Teutoburg Forest reminds us that even the greatest empires can fall when trust is misplaced, when pride blinds reason, and when a people resolve to fight for their freedom. The true face of Jesus. Did it exist? And what did he look like? Picture yourself in a small, sun-scorched village in Judea in the year 30 Anno Domini. The air is thick, with dust carried by the wind across rugged hills. Men and women in simple robes gather around a wandering preacher, a man whose words of love, justice, and a coming kingdom stir their hearts. This is Jesus of Nazareth, a carpenter's son, whose teachings will reshape the world. But what did this man known to history as Jesus Christ actually look like? In the first century, did anyone capture his face in a portrait, a sketch, or even a description? Or is his appearance a mystery hidden in the sands of time, leaving us to wonder about the true face of the man who changed history? This is the story of a quest for Jesus' likeness in the world. He walked a puzzle that has haunted believers and scholars for 2 millennia. Let's step into the first century world of Judea, a land under the iron grip of the Roman Empire. Jesus, a Jewish teacher, moves through villages like Nazareth and Capernaum, preaching to fishermen, farmers, and outcasts. His message of compassion and redemption draws crowds, but it also draws the attention of those in power. The Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, record his words, his miracles, and his death on a Roman cross. Yet they are silent about his appearance. Not a single verse describes the color of his eyes, the shape of his face, or the style of his hair. To his followers, it seems his physical form was unimportant compared to his teachings. But why this silence? And did anyone in that first century world attempt to capture what Jesus looked like in the first century? Judea was a place of deep religious tradition. The Jewish people, guided by the 10 Commandments, shunned graven images to avoid idolatry. Creating a portrait of a living person, even a revered teacher like Jesus, would have been rare and controversial. The early Christians, most of whom were Jewish, followed this tradition. They met in secret, in homes or hidden places, sharing stories of Jesus' life, not images. Unlike the Romans, who carved statues of their emperors, or the Greeks, who painted gods with perfect features, the followers of Jesus left no trace of his face. No sketch on papyrus, no carving in stone, no description in their writings. This absence is striking, especially for a figure whose influence was already spreading during his lifetime. Could someone have seen Jesus and recorded his likeness? His disciples who walked with him daily would have known his face intimately. Yet none of them, Peter, John, or Mary Magdalene, left behind a description. Perhaps they believed his message was eternal while his earthly form was temporary. Or perhaps in a world where writing was rare and reserved for sacred texts, describing his appearance seemed unnecessary. Even non-Christian sources from the first century, like the Roman historian Tacitus or the Jewish scholar Josephus, mention Jesus, but say nothing about how he looked. Josephus, writing decades later, refers to Jesus as a teacher and a troublemaker in Roman eyes, but his words focus on actions, not features. The silence of these sources leaves us with a void, a blank canvas, where Jesus' face should be. What can we infer about Jesus' appearance? From the first century context, as a Jewish man from Judea, Jesus would have resembled the people of his region. Archaeological findings, such as skeletal remains from first century Judea, suggest that men of the time were typically about 5 feet 5 inches tall, with olive or tan skin weathered by the sun. Their hair was likely dark, possibly black or brown, and often kept short to comply with Jewish customs, though some religious figures wore it longer as part of vows like the Nazirite. Beards were common among Jewish men, a sign of maturity and adherence to tradition. As a carpenter and preacher who walked miles across Judea, Jesus would have had a lean, rugged build shaped by labor and a simple life. His clothing was likely modest, a tunic and cloak, perhaps sandals befitting a man of the working class. Could there have been an image of Jesus created in the 1st century? Some legends suggest so, but they emerge long after his death. The Mandilion of Edessa, a cloth said to bear an image of Jesus's face, not made by human hands, is mentioned in later centuries, but lacks 1st century evidence. Some scholars believe it may have been an early Christian icon, perhaps created in the 2nd or 3rd century as Christianity spread. Similarly, the Veil of Veronica, said to hold an imprint of Jesus's face from his journey to the cross, is a medieval tradition with no roots in the 1st century. These stories reflect a growing desire to visualize Jesus, but they offer no concrete link to his lifetime. By the end of the 1st century, Christianity was spreading beyond Judea, reaching cities like Antioch and Rome. As the faith grew, so did the need to represent Jesus visually. But in the 1st century, no such images existed. The earliest known depictions of Jesus appear in the 2nd and 3rd centuries in places like the Roman catacombs. These show him as a youthful, clean-shaven figure, sometimes resembling a Roman shepherd or philosopher, far from the bearded, long-haired image we know today. These were not portraits based on eyewitness accounts, but artistic interpretations shaped by the cultures that adopted Christianity. The absence of 1st century images suggests that Jesus' early followers prioritized his spiritual legacy over his physical likeness. Why does the mystery of Jesus' face persist? In the 1st century, his followers saw no need to record his appearance, focusing instead on his teachings of love, forgiveness, and salvation. But as Christianity became a global faith, the human desire to connect with the divine through images grew. The lack of a 1st century portrait allowed each culture to imagine Jesus in their own way, making him a universal figure. Yet this same absence fuels our curiosity. Was he the gentle, long-haired figure of later art, or a rugged, sun-worn preacher with the face of a 1st century Jew? Modern forensic reconstructions, based on skeletal remains from Judea, suggest a man with a broad-faced, dark, curly hair and a prominent nose, different from the serene images of Western tradition. The search for Jesus' true face in the 1st century leads us to a deeper truth. His appearance, though unknown, is less important than his impact. In the villages of Judea, he was a man who spoke to the poor, challenged the powerful, and left a message that echoed across centuries. The lack of a portrait from his time allows him to transcend the limits of a single image belonging to all who seek him. As you imagine the dusty roads of 1st century Judea, picture a man whose words lit a fire in the hearts of those who heard him. His face may remain a mystery, but his presence is as real today as it was 2,000 years ago. The Holy Lance Mystery, sacred relic or legendary myth. Close your eyes and imagine a hill outside Jerusalem, in the shadow of a darkening sky. It is the year 33 Anno Domini, and on a rough wooden cross hangs a man whose life has shaken the foundations of the world. Roman soldiers stand guard, their armor glinting in the fading light. One of them, a centurion named Longinus, according to tradition, raises his spear and pierces the side of Jesus Christ, fulfilling a prophecy and marking a moment that will echo through history. This spear, later called the Holy Lance, or the Spear of Destiny, is said to carry the blood of the Savior. But is this sacred relic real, a tangible link to the crucifixion in the 1st century? Or is it a legend woven from faith and mystery that has captivated the world for 2,000 years? This is the story of the Holy Lance and the quest to uncover its truth. Let us step back into the 1st century, to the turbulent land of Judea under Roman rule. Jesus of Nazareth, a preacher whose teachings of love and redemption have drawn thousands, is crucified by order of Pontius Pilate. The Gospel of John describes a soldier piercing Jesus' side with a spear from which blood and water flow, a moment seen by early Christians as both a confirmation of his death and a symbol of divine grace. But the Gospels do not name this soldier, nor do they mention what became of the spear. In the 1st century, no Christian text or Jewish source records the fate of this weapon. Was it kept as a sacred object by Jesus' followers? Was it discarded as just another tool of a Roman execution? Or did it vanish into the chaos of that fateful day? In the first century context, relics were not yet a central part of Christian worship. Jesus' earliest followers, mostly Jews, living in Judea, focused on his teachings and the hope of his return, not on collecting physical objects tied to his life. The Jewish tradition rooted in the Ten Commandments frowned upon venerating objects to avoid idolatry. The idea of preserving a spear used in the crucifixion would have been foreign to these early believers, who met in secret fearing persecution from Roman authorities and Jewish leaders. The Gospels written in the late 1st century emphasize Jesus' words and resurrection, not the tools of his death. No contemporary source, Christian, Jewish, or Roman, mentions anyone claiming to possess the spear that pierced Jesus' side. Could the spear have been preserved in the 1st century? It's possible, but unlikely. Roman soldiers used lances called pilum or hasta, simple weapons of iron and wood mass-produced for military use. After an execution, such a spear would likely have been cleaned and returned to the armory, not treated as a sacred artifact. The soldier who wielded it, whether named Longinus or not, was a low-ranking centurion, unlikely to recognize the spiritual significance of his act. Early Christian communities, scattered and under threat, lacked the resources or inclination to track down and preserve such an object. Even the cross itself, later called the True Cross, is not mentioned as a relic in 1st century records. The name Longinus emerges centuries later in apocryphal texts like the Gospel of Nicodemus, written in the 4th century. This text calls the soldier Longinus and claims he was healed of blindness by Jesus' blood, a story that blends faith with legend. But in the 1st century, no such figure is documented. Roman historians, like Tacitus, who mention Jesus' execution, say nothing about a named soldier or a preserved spear. Jewish historian Josephus, writing in the 90s AD, describes the crucifixion of many rebels, but offers no hint of a relic tied to Jesus. The absence of 1st century evidence suggests the Holy Lance as a revered object was not part of early Christian tradition. Yet the idea of the Holy Lance took root as Christianity grew. By the 4th century, when Emperor Constantine embraced Christianity, relics became powerful symbols. The True Cross, said to be discovered by Constantine's mother Helena, sparked a fascination with objects tied to Jesus. The Holy Lance first appears in historical records around the 6th century, when a spear claimed to be the one that pierced Jesus was venerated in Jerusalem. This relic, later called the Lance of Antioch, was said to have been found during the First Crusade in 1098, inspiring crusaders to victory. But its origins are murky. Was it a 1st century artifact, somehow preserved through centuries of upheaval? Or was it a later creation crafted to bolster faith in a time of war? Another lance now housed in Vienna, Austria, is also called the Spear of Destiny. This relic, with an iron blade said to contain a nail from the crucifixion, has a documented history only from the 10th century. Some claim it was carried by emperors like Charlemagne, but no evidence links it to the 1st century. A third lance, kept in Rome, is venerated as a relic, but dates to later centuries. Scientific tests, including metallurgical analysis, show these artifacts are made of materials from later periods, not the 1st century. The lack of provenance documents, or artifacts, tracing back to Jesus' time, casts doubt on their authenticity. So, what can we say about the Holy Lance? In the 1st century, it likely existed as a Roman soldier's weapon used in the crucifixion described in the Gospel of John, but there is no evidence it was preserved or revered at the time. The early Christians, focused on spiritual teachings, had little interest in relic. The spear's transformation into a sacred object came later as Christianity spread and the faithful sought tangible connections to Jesus. The stories of Longinus and miraculous discoveries reflect a growing desire to touch the divine, but they belong to legend, not history. The mystery of the Holy Lance endures because it speaks to a deeper human longing. For believers, the spear is a symbol of sacrifice and redemption, a reminder of the moment when Jesus' blood was shed for humanity. For historians, it is a puzzle, a challenge to separate fact from faith. In the 1st century, the spear was likely just a tool of execution lost to time like countless others. Yet its legend has given it a power beyond its iron and wood, inspiring kings, crusaders, and pilgrims across centuries. As you reflect on the hill of Golgotha, imagine that fleeting moment when a spear pierced the side of a man who would change the world. Whether that spear lies in a cathedral, was lost in the dust of Judea, or exists only in the stories we tell, its true power lies not in its metal, but in the faith it inspires. The Holy Lance may remain a mystery, but the man it touched continues to shine through the ages, as real today as he was 2,000 years ago. The Disappearance of Tacitus. What happened to the famed historian Cornelius Tacitus, one of Rome's greatest historians, chronicled the triumphs and tragedies of the Roman Empire with a pen sharper than any sword. His works, like the Annals and Histories, offer a piercing look into the reigns of emperors from Tiberius to Domitian. Yet despite his brilliance, the end of Tacitus's life remains a mystery. Born around 56 Anno Domini, he rose to prominence in the 1st century, but no record tells us when or how he died. Did he fall victim to political intrigue, fade into obscurity, or meet a quiet end lost to history? This is the story of Tacitus, a man who illuminated the past but whose own fate remains shrouded in the shadows of the 1st century. Let us step into the world of late 1st century Rome, a city of marble and ambition where emperors ruled with divine authority and dissent could mean death. Tacitus lived during a turbulent time under the Flavian dynasty emperors Vespasian, Titus, and Domitian, who restored stability after the chaos of Nero's fall. As a senator, orator, and historian, Tacitus navigated this dangerous world with skill. His writings reveal a man of sharp intellect, unafraid to criticize the excesses of power, albeit cautiously. He described Nero's tyranny and Domitian's paranoia with a clarity that made his works timeless. But while his words survived, the details of his life's end did not. Why does the trail of such a prominent figure go cold? Tacitus was born into a well-off family, likely in Gaul or northern Italy, around 56 Anno Domini. By his 20s, he was climbing Rome's political ladder, serving as a quaestor praetor, and eventually consul in 97 Anno Domini under Emperor Nerva. He married the daughter of Agricola, a renowned general, linking him to Rome's elite. His career peaked under Trajan when he published his major works, but after around 117 Anno Domini, when his annals and histories were likely completed, Tacitus vanishes from the historical record. No ancient source, Roman, Christian, or otherwise, mentions his death. This silence is striking for a man of his stature, whose friends included Pliny the Younger, a prolific letter writer who documented the lives of many contemporaries. In the 1st century, Rome was a place where prominence could be perilous. Emperors like Domitian, who ruled from 81 to 96 Anno Domini, were notoriously suspicious of intellectuals and senators. Tacitus himself wrote of Domitian's reign as a time when we witnessed the extreme of servitude, with informants and executions stifling free thought. Could Tacitus have fallen victim to such purges? His critical tone, though veiled, might have offended powerful figures. Yet there is no evidence of a trial or execution. Pliny the Younger, who corresponded with Tacitus, never mentions a dramatic end. If Tacitus was targeted, it was done so quietly that no record survived. Another possibility is that Tacitus simply retired from public life. By the early 2nd century, he would have been in his late 50s or early 60s, an advanced age for the time. He may have withdrawn to a villa in the countryside, perhaps in Campania or Gaul, to write in peace. Roman elites often retired to focus on literary pursuits, and Tacitus, with his wealth and status, could have chosen this path. But why would such a choice leave no trace? Pliny's letters, which detail the lives of other retirees, are silent about Tacitus's later years. This absence suggests either a deliberate withdrawal or an event that erased his final days from history. Could Tacitus have met a natural end unrecorded due to the limits of 1st century record-keeping? Death notices for even prominent Romans were not always preserved, especially if they died far from Rome. Diseases like malaria or plague were common, and life expectancy, even for the elite, rarely exceeded 60. Tacitus, born around 56, Anno Domini, would have been nearing this age by the time his works were published. A quiet death from illness or old age is plausible, but it feels unsatisfying for a man whose life was so public. The lack of any epitaph, will, or mention by contemporaries like Pliny or Suetonius deepens the mystery. Some scholars speculate that Tacitus's disappearance might relate to his work. His Annals and Histories critiqued the moral decay of Rome's emperors, from Tiberius's paranoia to Nero's excesses. Such writings, even if published posthumously or under Trajan's more tolerant rule, could have made enemies. If Tacitus lived into Trajan's reign, 98, 117 Anno Domini, he might have faced backlash from those loyal to earlier regimes. Yet, Trajan's era was relatively open, and Tacitus's friend Pliny thrived under the same emperor. A political assassination seems unlikely without some hint in the sources. Another angle to consider is the survival of Tacitus's works. The Annals and Histories are incomplete, with gaps in the texts covering certain emperors. Were these gaps due to deliberate censorship, natural decay, or Tacitus's own unfinished work? Some historians wonder if Tacitus's disappearance is tied to the loss of parts of his writings. If he died suddenly, perhaps during a journey or in a remote location, his final manuscripts and personal records might have been lost. The first century was a time when texts were copied by hand, and many were destroyed by fire war or neglect. Tacitus's silence after 117 Anno Domini could reflect the fragility of historical preservation. In the first century, Rome's elite left traces through inscriptions, letters, or mentions in other works. Tacitus, as a consul and historian, should have left such a trail. His contemporary Pliny the Younger wrote letters about friends' deaths, illnesses, and retirements, yet none mentioned Tacitus's fate. Suetonius, another historian, detailed the lives of emperors, but ignored Tacitus's end. This void is puzzling. Even lesser figures often had their deaths recorded, yet Tacitus, whose words shaped our understanding of Rome, slipped away without a word. The mystery of Tacitus's disappearance is not just about his death, but about what it reveals of his time. The first century was a world of power and peril, where historians walked a fine line between truth and survival. Tacitus's work survived, giving us vivid accounts of Rome's glory and corruption, but his own story ends in shadow. Did he choose obscurity, retreating to a quiet life of reflection? Was he silenced by enemies, his fate erased from the records? Or did he simply succumb to the fragility of life in an age without modern medicine? As we ponder Tacitus's fate, we are reminded of the limits of history. Even the greatest chroniclers can vanish, their final chapters unwritten. His disappearance is a testament to the fleeting nature of life in the first century, where even a man who captured the past could not secure his own place in it. Today, when we read Tacitus's words, we hear the voice of a man who saw Rome's heart, its virtues, and its flaws. His life's end may remain a mystery, but his legacy endures as sharp and enduring as the empire he chronicled. The origins of Christianity. How did it spread so fast? In the year 33, Anno Domini, a small group of Jewish followers in Jerusalem mourned the crucifixion of their teacher, Jesus of Nazareth. Yet within a few decades, their obscure movement, born in a remote corner of the Roman Empire, had spread like wildfire, reaching cities from Antioch to Rome. By the end of the first century, Christianity had thousands of followers, defying persecution, cultural barriers, and the might of Rome. How did this faith, rooted in the teachings of a humble carpenter, grow so rapidly in a world hostile to its message? What fueled its rise in the first century, transforming it from a tiny sect into a force that would reshape history? This is the story of Christianity's mysterious origins and its astonishing spread. Let us step into the first century world, a time when the Roman Empire ruled with iron and marble, stretching from Britain to Egypt. Judea, where Christianity began, was a restless province, simmering with religious fervor and rebellion against Roman control. Jesus, a Jewish preacher, taught a radical message of love, forgiveness, and a kingdom of God open to all, rich and poor, Jew and Gentile. His crucifixion around 33 Anno Domini, ordered by Pontius Pilate, should have ended his movement. Most Jewish sects, led by charismatic leaders, faded after their deaths. Yet Christianity did not. Instead, it exploded, spreading far beyond Jerusalem in a single century. The spark of this growth lies with Jesus' followers, a small band of disciples, fishermen, tax collectors, and ordinary men and women who believed he had risen from the dead. This belief, central to Christianity, set it apart. The resurrection gave his followers a conviction that Jesus was not just a teacher, but the Messiah, the Son of God. In the first century, this message was revolutionary. The disciples, led by figures like Peter and John, began preaching in Jerusalem, risking arrest and execution. Their courage, fueled by faith, inspired others to join even in the face of danger. One key figure in Christianity's spread was Paul of Tarsus, a former persecutor of Christians who became their greatest missionary. Around the 40s, Anno Domini Paul, a Roman citizen and educated Jew, experienced a vision of Jesus that transformed his life. He traveled across the Mediterranean from Antioch to Corinth to Ephesus, preaching to both Jews and Gentiles. Paul's genius was his ability to adapt the message to diverse audiences. He argued that Gentiles did not need to follow Jewish laws like circumcision to become Christians. This openness made the faith accessible to non-Jews, who formed the majority of the Roman Empire's population. By the 60s, Anno Domini Paul's missions had planted Christian communities in major cities, laying the foundation for rapid growth. The first-century Roman world was uniquely suited for Christianity's spread. The empire's roads, built for armies and trade, allowed missionaries like Paul to travel quickly and safely. Greek, the common language of the Eastern Mediterranean, enabled the Gospels and Paul's letters to reach diverse peoples without translation. Roman cities were melting pots of cultures: Greeks, Syrians, Egyptians, and Jews, creating a fertile ground for a universal message. Christianity's promise of eternal life and a personal connection to God appealed to many, especially the poor slaves and women who found dignity in a faith that declared all equal before God. Another factor was the structure of early Christian communities. Unlike traditional religions which centered on temples and rituals, Christians met in homes, forming tight-knit groups that offered support and belonging. These communities welcomed outcasts, widows, orphans, and the marginalized, creating a sense of family in a world where social bonds were often weak. By the 50s, Anno Domini house churches had sprung up in cities like Rome, Thessalonica, and Philippi, spreading the faith through personal connections. Converts shared the message with friends and neighbors, creating a ripple effect across the empire. Christianity's message also resonated because it addressed universal human needs. In the first century, many Romans were disillusioned with traditional gods who seemed distant and capricious. Philosophies like Stoicism offered wisdom but lacked warmth. Christianity, with its emphasis on love, forgiveness, and hope, filled this void. Stories of Jesus' miracles and teachings, recorded in the Gospels by the late 1st century, captivated listeners. The idea of a God who suffered and died for humanity was unlike anything in Roman or Jewish tradition, drawing converts who sought meaning in a turbulent world. Persecution paradoxically fueled Christianity's growth. In the 1st century, Christians faced hostility from both Jewish authorities, who saw them as heretics, and Romans, who viewed their refusal to worship emperors as treason. The martyrdom of figures like Stephen in the 30s, Anno Domini, and Paul and Peter in the 60s, Anno Domini, under Nero, inspired awe. Early Christians believed martyrdom was a path to eternal life, and their willingness to die for their faith impressed onlookers. As the 2nd century writer Tertullian later said, "The blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church." In the 1st century, this courage made Christianity a faith worth investigating. The role of women also set Christianity apart. In a patriarchal world, women like Mary Magdalene, Lydia, and Priscilla played key roles as supporters and leaders in early Christian communities. The faith's emphasis on equality before God gave women a status rare in Roman society, attracting many to join and spread the message. By the end of the 1st century, women were hosting house churches and sharing the gospel, amplifying Christianity's reach. Could there be other reasons for its rapid spread? Some historians point to the Jewish diaspora communities of Jews scattered across the empire who were familiar with messianic ideas. Early Christians, many of whom were Jewish, preached in synagogues, gaining converts among Jews and God-fearers Gentiles drawn to Judaism but hesitant to fully convert. This gave Christianity a ready audience in cities like Alexandria and Rome. Others suggest the faith's adaptability, blending Jewish ethics with Greek philosophy, made it appealing to diverse groups. Yet the mystery remains. How did a small persecuted sect grow so fast in a single century? by 100 Anno Domini Christians numbered in the tens of thousands, with communities in every major city of the empire. The lack of a centralized structure, unlike Rome's state religion, allowed Christianity to spread organically, adapting to local cultures. Its message of hope, community, and eternal life spoke to a world craving purpose. The first century context: Roman infrastructure, Greek language, and social unrest created a perfect storm for its expansion. As we reflect on Christianity's origins, we see a faith that defied the odds. From a handful of disciples in Jerusalem to communities across the empire, it spread not through force, but through conviction, courage, and connection. The mystery of its rapid rise lies not just in history, but in the hearts of those who heard Jesus' message and carried it forward. Today, when we look at the churches, cathedrals, and billions of believers worldwide, we see the legacy of that first-century spark, a movement that began with a few and grew to encompass the world. The Great Fire of Rome, 64 Anno Domini. Who really started it? In the summer of 64 Anno Domini, the city of Rome, the heart of the greatest empire the world had ever known, was consumed by a fire so devastating it left the eternal city in ruins. For 6 days, flames roared through its crowded streets, destroying homes, temples, and livelihoods. When the smoke cleared, 2/3 of Rome lay in ashes, and a question burned as fiercely as the fire itself: who was responsible? Was it Emperor Nero, blamed by many for starting the blaze to clear land for his grand palace? Was it an accident sparked by the city's cramped and flammable conditions? Or was it the Christians, a small but growing sect accused by Nero as scapegoats? This is the story of the Great Fire of Rome and the enduring mystery of its true cause. Let us step into the world of first-century Rome, a sprawling metropolis of over 1 million people, where marble palaces stood alongside wooden tenements. Under Emperor Nero, who ruled from 54 to 68, Anno Domini Rome was a city of splendor and excess, but also of tension. Nero, a young and flamboyant ruler, was known for his love of art, chariot races, and grand building projects. Yet his reign was marred by suspicion and unrest. The Roman elite distrusted his erratic behavior, and the common people grumbled under heavy taxes. It was in this volatile atmosphere, on the night of the 18th of July 64 Anno Domini, that a fire broke out near the Circus Maximus, the city's grand racetrack. The fire began in a district filled with shops and warehouses packed with flammable goods, like oil, timber, and cloth. Rome's narrow streets and tightly packed wooden buildings were a tinderbox waiting for a spark. A strong summer wind fanned the flames, and within hours, the fire spread uncontrollably. For 6 days, it raged, destroying 7 of Rome's 14 districts and severely damaging 3 others. Thousands of Romans lost their homes, their possessions, and for many, their lives. The historian Tacitus, writing decades later, described the chaos. People fled in panic. Some threw themselves into the flames out of despair, and others were trampled in the streets. Yet no contemporary source tells us definitively how the fire started. The most infamous suspect is Nero himself. Ancient sources like the historians Suetonius and Cassius Dio, writing years after the event, claim Nero started the fire to clear space for his dream project, the Domus Aurea, a lavish golden palace that would cover a vast swath of Rome. They paint a vivid image of Nero, watching the city burn, playing his lyre, and reciting poetry indifferent to the suffering of his people. This story has endured, cementing Nero's reputation as a villain. But is it true? Tacitus, a more reliable source who lived closer to the event, is skeptical. He notes that Nero was in Antium, 35 miles away, when the fire began, and returned to Rome to organize relief efforts, opening his palaces to the homeless and providing food. These actions suggest a leader responding to a crisis, not causing one. If Nero did not start the fire, could it have been an accident? Rome's conditions in the first century made fires common. The city's tenements, built of wood and straw, were packed tightly together, with narrow streets that blocked escape. Open flames from cooking fires, oil lamps, and religious altars were everywhere. A single spark carried by the wind could ignite a catastrophe. Tacitus reports that the fire's origin near the Circus Maximus, a busy commercial area, supports the idea of an accident. Similar fires had struck Rome before, and the summer heat of 64 Anno Domini would have made the city especially vulnerable. Yet the scale of the destruction, far greater than any previous fire, raised suspicions that it was no mere mishap. Nero, facing public outrage, pointed the finger at a new and controversial group, the Christians. In the 1st century, Christians were a small but growing sect, viewed with suspicion by both Romans and Jews. Their refusal to worship Roman gods or the emperor was seen as subversive, even treasonous. Tacitus writes that Nero blamed the Christians for the fire, unleashing a brutal persecution. Christians were arrested, tortured, and executed in horrific ways. Some were crucified, others burned alive as human torches to light Nero's gardens. But did they start the fire? There is no evidence to support this. Tacitus, no friend to Christians, calls the accusation a convenient scapegoat, noting that their persecution was more about appeasing public anger than proving guilt. The Christians' small numbers and lack of influence in 64 Anno Domini make it unlikely they could orchestrate such a massive disaster. Could there have been another culprit? Some historians speculate about political enemies of Nero, such as disgruntled senators or rivals within the imperial court. Nero's reign was fraught with conspiracies, and a fire could have been a way to destabilize his rule. Yet no contemporary source names such a group, and starting a fire that risked the entire city would have been a reckless act even for a desperate conspirator. Others suggest Jewish zealots who were rebelling against Roman rule in Judea, but their influence in Rome was minimal, and no evidence links them to the fire. The lack of definitive proof leaves the mystery open. Tacitus, our primary source, refuses to confirm any single cause, stating only that the fire's origin was uncertain. Suetonius and Cassius Dio, writing later, lean heavily on Nero's guilt, but their accounts are colored by bias against him. Archaeological evidence offers little help. The fire's destruction was so thorough that no physical clues remain. The Domus Aurea, built after the fire, is often cited as evidence of Nero's motive, but its construction could simply reflect his ambition to rebuild a grander Rome, not a premeditated plan. In the 1st century, rumors and propaganda shaped perceptions more than facts. Nero's enemies used the fire to tarnish his legacy, while his supporters portrayed him as a victim of circumstance. The Christians, an easy target, bore the brunt of public anger. The truth likely lies in the mundane, a spark in a flammable city, amplified by wind and poor urban planning. Yet the scale of the disaster and the lack of a clear answer have kept the mystery alive for centuries. As we reflect on the Great Fire of Rome, we see a city reborn from its ashes. Nero rebuilt Rome with wider streets and stone buildings, measures that made future fires less devastating. The persecution of Christians, though brutal, drew attention to their faith, ironically aiding its spread. The mystery of who started the fire, Nero, Christians, or chance, remains unsolved, a reminder of how history can obscure truth in the heat of crisis. Today, when we walk through Rome's ancient ruins, we tread on the scars of that fire, a moment when the eternal city burned, and the question of who lit the flame still flickers in the shadows. Even Hadrian's mysterious stones, symbols, tools, or something else. In the year 117, Anno Domini, a new emperor ascended to the throne of Rome, a man whose vision would reshape the empire's borders and its legacy. Hadrian, known for his intellect and ambition, left behind a trail of enigmatic structures, among them the famous stones that bear his name, massive enduring monuments like Hadrian's Wall and other stoneworks scattered across the Roman world. Yet their true purpose and deeper significance remain shrouded in mystery. Were these stones merely defensive barriers, symbols of imperial power, or something more profound, tied to Hadrian's vision of Rome's place in the cosmos? As we journey back to the cusp of the 1st and 2nd centuries, we unravel the enigma of Hadrian's stones, seeking answers to their elusive meaning in a world ruled by Rome. To understand Hadrian's stones, we must first step into the late 1st century, a time when the Roman Empire was at its zenith, stretching from the Atlantic to the Euphrates. The century saw emperors like Nero, Vespasian, and Domitian, whose reigns were marked by conquest, rebellion, and consolidation. By the time Hadrian became emperor in 117, Anno Domini, Rome was a sprawling superpower, but its borders were under strain from rebellious tribes and internal unrest. Hadrian, unlike his predecessor Trajan, who expanded the empire to its greatest extent, chose to fortify rather than conquer. His most famous legacy, Hadrian's Wall, stretches 73 miles across northern Britain, from the River Tyne to the Solway Firth. Built starting in 122 Anno Domini, it is a testament to Roman engineering, but its stones hold secrets that historians still debate. Hadrian's Wall, constructed of turf timber and stone, was a monumental undertaking. It featured mile-castles, turrets, and forts manned by thousands of soldiers. In the 1st century, Britain was a wild frontier recently subdued after Boudicca's rebellion in 60 Anno Domini. The northern tribes like the Picts and Brigantes remained a constant threat. Was the wall purely a military barrier meant to keep these tribes at bay? The historian Cassius Dio, writing a century later, suggests it was built to mark the empire's boundary and control movement. Yet the wall's scale, its height, its forts, and its meticulous design seems excessive for mere defense. Some scholars argue it was a statement of power, a line drawn in stone to proclaim Rome's dominion over a land it could not fully tame. Beyond Hadrian's Wall, other stone structures linked to Hadrian add to the mystery. In the late 1st century, Rome's infrastructure was already vast, with aqueducts, temples, and roads built under earlier emperors. Hadrian, however, left his mark with projects like the rebuilding of the Pantheon, completed around 126 Anno Domini, and stone fortifications across the empire from Germany to North Africa. These stones, often inscribed with dedications to Hadrian, suggest a purpose beyond utility. Were they symbols of his divine authority, meant to immortalize his reign? Hadrian was deeply influenced by Greek culture and philosophy, viewing himself as a restorer of Rome's golden age. His stones may have been intended to reflect this vision, blending practicality with cosmic significance. In the 1st century context, stone was more than a building material. It was a symbol of permanence in a world of flux. Roman emperors used monuments to assert their legacy, as seen in Augustus's Ara Pacis or Vespasian's Colosseum, begun in 70 Anno Domini. Hadrian, ascending just after the 1st century, continued this tradition, but with a unique flair. His wall in Britain, for example, was not just a barrier, but a frontier of civilization, separating the ordered Roman world from the chaos beyond. Yet its purpose remains unclear. Archaeological evidence shows that the wall was not heavily fortified in all sections, and trade continued across it. Some sections were more symbolic than defensive, with elaborate gateways suggesting a ceremonial role. Could Hadrian's stones have held a religious or cultural significance? In the 1st century, Roman religion blended with local beliefs, especially in provinces like Britain. Hadrian, known for his interest in mysticism, may have seen his stones as more than physical markers. Some historians suggest the wall was aligned with astronomical or spiritual principles, reflecting Hadrian's fascination with the cosmos. Inscriptions on stones along the wall dedicated to gods like Jupiter and local deities, hinting at a sacred purpose. Yet no definitive evidence confirms this, and the wall's practical role controlling trade, taxation, and migration seems equally plausible. Another mystery is the labor behind these stones. Building Hadrian's Wall required immense resources. Thousands of soldiers, slaves, and local workers quarried and hauled stone across rugged terrain. In the 1st century, Rome's legions were skilled engineers, but the wall's construction, begun just after the century's end, was a logistical marvel. Why invest such effort in a remote province? Some argue Hadrian sought to occupy restless legions, preventing rebellion by keeping them busy. Others see it as a propaganda tool, showcasing Rome's ability to impose order on the wild north. The stones themselves, many bearing legionary marks, offer clues, but no clear answers. The significance of Hadrian's stones extends beyond Britain. In Germany, the Limes Germanicus, a series of forts and stone walls, was strengthened under Hadrian. In North Africa, stone structures marked Roman presence in the desert. These projects, while rooted in the 1st century tradition of fortification, reflect Hadrian's unique approach: consolidation over expansion. Unlike Trajan's conquests, Hadrian's stones defined boundaries, signaling a shift in imperial policy. But their deeper meaning, whether political, cultural, or spiritual, remains debated. Were they a pragmatic response to a stretched empire or a grand gesture to eternity? The lack of clear answers fuels the mystery. Ancient sources like Cassius Dio and the Historia Augusta offer glimpses of Hadrian's motives, but no definitive explanation. Archaeological finds such as inscriptions and tools reveal the stone's construction, but not their full purpose. In the 1st century, Rome's borders were fluid, and Hadrian's decision to fortify them with stone marked a new era. Yet the stone's significance, defensive, symbolic, or sacred, eludes us, much like Hadrian himself. A man who traveled his empire blending Roman might with Greek ideals. As we ponder Hadrian's stones, we see a man who sought to leave his mark on a vast and unruly world. His wall and other monuments stand as testaments to Rome's power, but their true purpose remains a riddle. Were they barriers against enemies, declarations of imperial glory, or offerings to the gods? The stones of Hadrian scattered across the empire speak of a ruler who understood the power of permanence, yet their meaning, like the man who built them, slips through our fingers, a mystery carved in the enduring rock of the ancient world. Emperor Vespasian's death. Did he really die as recorded? In the year 79, Anno Domini Vespasian, the rugged general who rose from humble origins to become Rome's savior emperor, stood at the pinnacle of power. Having restored stability to an empire torn by civil war, he was hailed as the founder of the Flavian dynasty. Yet as summer turned to autumn, Vespasian vanished from the historical stage, his death cloaked in mystery and contradiction. Did he succumb to illness, as some claim, joking about his own mortality to the end? Was he poisoned by enemies lurking in the shadows of Rome's political intrigues? Or does the lack of clear records hide a darker truth? This is the story Vespasian's Disappearance, a puzzle that continues to perplex historians as we seek to uncover the fate of one of Rome's greatest rulers. Let us step into the 1st century, a time when Rome was a colossus straddling the known world, its streets alive with ambition, conspiracy, and glory. The year 69, Anno Domini, known as the Year of the Four Emperors, saw Rome descend into chaos after Nero's suicide. Galba Otho and Vitellius rose and fell in rapid succession, each claiming the throne only to be cut down by rivals. Into this turmoil stepped Titus Flavius Vespasian, a seasoned commander, born around 9 Anno Domini to a modest family in central Italy. Unlike the aristocratic Julio Claudians, Vespasian was a man of the people, a soldier who earned respect through grit and competence. By 69 Anno Domini, he emerged victorious, crowned emperor at age 60, bringing order to a fractured empire. Vespasian's reign from 69 to 79 Anno Domini was a triumph of pragmatism. He rebuilt Rome's finances, drained by Nero's excesses, and launched grand projects like the Flavian Amphitheater, later called the Colosseum. He quelled rebellions in Judea, where his son Titus crushed the Jewish revolt in 70 Anno Domini, and strengthened Rome's borders. Known for his blunt humor and down-to-earth demeanor, Vespasian won the loyalty of soldiers and citizens alike. Yet despite his prominence, the circumstances of his death in 79 Anno Domini remain shrouded in ambiguity, with ancient sources offering conflicting accounts that fuel debate to this day. According to the historian Suetonius, writing decades later, Vespasian died of a sudden illness in the 7th of June 9 Anno Domini, at the age of 69. While staying at a family villa in Aquae Cutiliae, a spa town near his birthplace, he reportedly suffered from fever and diarrhea, possibly from contaminated water or food. Suetonius paints a vivid picture. As his condition worsened, Vespasian the Stoic, joked, "Dear me, I think I'm becoming a god." Mocking the Roman tradition of deifying emperors, he insisted on standing to meet his end, declaring that an emperor should die on his feet. This account suggests a natural death fitting for a man of his age, in a time when disease was a common killer. Yet not all sources align with Suetonius. Cassius Dio, another historian writing in the 3rd century, offers a vaguer account, stating only that Vespasian fell ill and died without specifying a cause. This lack of detail raises questions. Was his illness truly natural, or could it have been induced? The 1st century was a perilous time for emperors, with poison a favored weapon in Rome's cutthroat politics. Nero's mother Agrippina and others had met such fates, and Vespasian, despite his popularity, had enemies. His reforms, including heavy taxes, to rebuild Rome's treasury, angered some elites, while his rise from humble origins stirred resentment among the old aristocracy. Could a rival perhaps within his own court have orchestrated his demise? Another possibility is political intrigue tied to succession. Vespasian's son Titus, his heir, was a capable but controversial figure known for his lavish lifestyle and ties to the Jewish princess Berenice. Some senators distrusted Titus, fearing he would emulate Nero's excesses. Did factions in Rome, wary of the Flavian dynasty, seek to eliminate Vespasian to disrupt the succession? No direct evidence supports this, but the absence of detailed records fuels speculation. Unlike earlier emperors whose assassinations were well documented, Vespasian's death lacks the clarity of a conspiracy, leaving historians to wonder if a cover-up obscured the truth. The first-century context adds to the mystery. Rome's historical records, while rich, were often shaped by bias or propaganda. Suetonius and Cassius Dio wrote long after Vespasian's death, relying on second-hand accounts. Tacitus, a contemporary historian, might have offered insight, but his works covering Vespasian's later years are lost. Pliny the Elder, who served under Vespasian, mentions his reign, but not his death. This silence is striking for an emperor of Vespasian's stature, whose rule marked a turning point for Rome. The lack of inscriptions, letters, or epitaphs detailing his end, common for prominent Romans, deepens the enigma. Could Vespasian's death have been unremarkable, lost to the limitations of first-century record-keeping? Life expectancy, even for the elite, was low, and Vespasian at 69 was old by Roman standards. Diseases like dysentery or malaria were rampant, and spa towns like Aquae Cutiliae, while popular for healing, could harbor contaminated water. A natural death aligns with Suetonius's account, yet the story of Vespasian's humor and stoicism feels almost too perfect, crafted to burnish his legacy as a down-to-earth ruler. Some scholars suspect Suetonius exaggerated these details to contrast Vespasian with the decadent Nero. Another angle is Vespasian's deification. After his death, the Senate declared him a god, a rare honor for a non-Julio Claudian emperor. This act, orchestrated by Titus, suggests a smooth transition, not a scandalous end. Yet the haste of his deification, announced soon after his death, could indicate an effort to quell rumors of foul play. In the first century, divine status was a political tool, used to legitimize successors and silence critics. If Vespasian was poisoned or killed, Titus might have suppressed the truth to secure his own rule. The mystery of Vespasian's death lies in the gaps of history. Unlike Nero's dramatic suicide or Caligula's assassination, Vespasian's end is quiet, almost too ordinary for a man of his impact. Did he die naturally, as Suetonius claims his body, failing after a decade of rule? Was he a victim of poison, a casualty of Rome's endless power struggles? Or did he simply fade from view, his death unrecorded due to the chaos of a transitioning empire? The lack of consensus among ancient sources leaves us grasping at shadows. As we reflect on Vespasian's disappearance, we see a man who rose from obscurity to save Rome, only to vanish in mystery. His reign rebuilt an empire, but his death remains a question mark, a reminder of how even the greatest figures can slip through history's cracks. The stones of the Colosseum, begun under his rule, stand as his legacy, but the truth of his final moments eludes us, lost in the intrigues and silences of the first century. The Julian Calendar Fix. Why was time quietly rewritten? In the year 46 before Christ, Julius Caesar, Rome's greatest general and dictator, reshaped time itself, creating a calendar that would govern the world for centuries. The Julian calendar, a revolutionary system of 365 days and a leap year, brought order to Rome's chaotic reckoning of days. Yet within decades, by the first century, this calendar faced subtle but mysterious adjustments. Its rhythms altered in ways that puzzled priests, astronomers, and emperors. Why was the Julian calendar modified so soon after its creation? What secrets lay behind these changes? And who orchestrated them? This is the story of the Julian calendar's enigmatic tweaks in the first century. a tale of precision power, the human quest to master time. Let us step into the world of the first century, when Rome stood as the unchallenged master of the Mediterranean, its empire bound by law's roads and now a new way of measuring time. Before Julius Caesar, Rome's calendar was a mess, a lunar system of 355 days that drifted out of sync with the seasons. Priests known as pontifices added extra months at will, often for political gain, causing confusion for farmers, merchants, and generals. In 46 before Christ, Caesar, advised by the Greek astronomer Sosigenes of Alexandria, introduced the Julian calendar, a solar-based system of 365.25 days, with an extra day added every 4 years to keep it aligned with the Earth's orbit. This was a bold leap, requiring a year of confusion, with 445 days to reset the calendar. But by the first century, flaws in its implementation surfaced, demanding mysterious corrections. The Julian calendar's initial design was elegant, but not flawless. Sosigenes calculated the solar year as 365 days and 6 hours, close to the true length of 365. 2,422 days. To account for the extra 6 hours, a leap day was inserted every 4th year, making the average year 365.25 days. However, the priests in charge of the calendar, still steeped in Rome's old traditions, misunderstood Caesar's instructions. Instead of adding a leap day every 4 years, they inserted one every 3 years, starting around 44 before Christ, after Caesar's assassination. This error, known as the triennial leap year mistake, added too many days, pushing the calendar ahead of the solar year. By the 1st century, under Emperor Augustus, the misalignment was noticeable. Festivals tied to seasons like planting or harvest were drifting out of place. The correction of this error is one of the great mysteries of the 1st century. Augustus, who ruled from 27 before Christ to 14 Anno Domini, sought to perfect Caesar's legacy. Around 8 before Christ, he ordered a major adjustment to the Julian calendar, halting leap years for several years to realign it with the seasons. Ancient sources like the historian Suetonius mention this reform but provide few details. How was it implemented? Who advised Augustus? The Roman writer Macrobius, centuries later, suggests that the leap year error had added about 12 extra days by 8 before Christ. To fix this, Augustus likely skipped leap years for 12 to 16 years, though the exact duration is debated. This adjustment required meticulous planning, as it affected religious festivals, legal contracts, and agricultural cycles across the empire. The secrecy surrounding these changes adds to the mystery. In the 1st century, the calendar was not just a tool for timekeeping, but a sacred institution overseen by the pontifices, with the emperor as Pontifex Maximus, or chief priest. Altering the calendar was a delicate matter, as it could anger traditionalists or disrupt public life. Augustus, known for his political savvy, likely kept the reforms discreet to avoid unrest. No grand inscriptions or decrees announced the changes, unlike other Augustan reforms. Instead, the corrections were quietly enacted, with priests and astronomers working behind the scenes. Some scholars suggest Egyptian astronomers familiar with solar calendars may have advised Augustus, given Rome's control of Egypt after Cleopatra's defeat in 31 before Christ. Another layer of the mystery is the technical precision required. The Romans lacked modern instruments, yet their astronomers, building on Greek and Egyptian knowledge, calculated the solar year with remarkable accuracy. The Julian calendar's 365.25 days was only 11 minutes longer than the true solar year, a minor error that would not cause significant drift for centuries. But the triennial leap year mistake showed that even brilliant systems could falter in human hands. The correction under Augustus required not only stopping leap years, but also ensuring that future leap days followed the correct 4-year cycle. This precision, achieved without computers or telescopes, astonishes modern scholars who marvel at the Romans' ability to manage such complex calculations. Why was the calendar so important in the 1st century for Rome? Time was power. A unified calendar synchronized the empire's vast territories from Britain to Syria, aligning tax collections, military campaigns, and religious rites. Augustus, who portrayed himself as the restorer of Rome's golden age, saw the calendar as part of his legacy. By fixing Caesar's system, he ensured that festivals like the Ludi Romani, tied to specific dates, occurred at the right seasons, reinforcing his role as a divine ruler. The calendar's adjustments, though technical, were a political act, cementing Augustus's authority over time itself. The lack of detailed records adds to the enigma. Unlike other Roman achievements like the Colosseum or aqueducts, the calendar reforms left few traces. Suetonius mentions Augustus's correction in passing, and Macrobius provides only vague details. No contemporary accounts like those of Livy or Pliny the Elder describe the process. This silence may reflect the reform's sensitive nature, as changes to sacred time could provoke backlash. Some historians speculate that Augustus deliberately downplayed the adjustments to avoid drawing attention to the original error, which could have embarrassed the priesthood or tarnished Caesar's legacy. Could there have been other motives for the changes? Some scholars suggest Augustus used the calendar to align Rome with Egyptian traditions, strengthening ties with the province that supplied much of the empire's grain. Others propose a religious motive, as Augustus revived ancient Roman rites, tying them to a corrected calendar to legitimize his rule. The mystery lies not just in how the changes were made, but why they were so discreet, leaving historians to piece together fragments from later sources. As we reflect on the Julian calendar's modifications, we see a civilization grappling with the challenge of measuring time. The Romans of the 1st century, under Caesar and Augustus, harnessed astronomy, mathematics, and political will to create a system that shaped the Western world. The corrections, though shrouded in secrecy, reveal a society striving for order in a complex empire. How did they achieve such precision with so little? Why did they hide their methods? The Julian calendar, with its silent adjustments, stands as a testament to Rome's genius, a mystery of timekeeping that continues to intrigue us 2 millennia later. Centuries have passed, but the mysteries of the 1st century still echo through time. Despite the rise and fall of empires, despite the progress of science and history, some questions remain stubbornly unanswered, hidden in the ashes of Rome. The silence of ancient forests and the blurred lines of religious and political upheaval. These are not just old stories. They are puzzles that shape how we see the past and perhaps how we understand ourselves. If these mysteries intrigued, you imagine what other secrets history still holds. Subscribe to our channel now and step with us into the shadows of time, where every question leads to another mystery.